going to hear from Firdousa Oniza, and Oniza is going to give us an overview of the Growth Management Act and the implementing laws from a planner's perspective. Oniza is a senior planner for ICF International, a big shot consulting firm in Seattle. Before that, she was the planning manager for the city of Kennewick, where she worked for about 8 years. Her planning career in Washington began in 2000 when she started working for LMN Architects in Seattle. Prior to that, she worked in Atlanta, Georgia. She has her master's from Georgia Tech, and her background is in architecture and city planning. She strongly believes in creating more training and continuing education opportunities for planners as well as local decision makers. With that, please welcome Firdousa Oniza.
I'm really excited to be here tonight, and I really appreciate your inviting me to talk about comprehensive planning. It's a little daunting to talk after a city attorney talks about legal basis of planning, but I'm going to try to talk about comprehensive planning and then Growth Management Act and some of those components of Growth Management Act. So we will be talking about Growth Management Act, Growth Management Act's planning goals, planning requirements, and then components of comprehensive plan and citizen participation. Why are we talking about Growth Management Act? We are discussing Growth Management Act because it sets the framework for the comprehensive plan. So understanding the basic of GMA would help us understand how Growth Management Act is implementing or implemented through your comprehensive plan. So that's how that's why we're talking about a little bit of GMA and then background of it. Early 80s, before Comprehensive Plan or Growth Management Act was implemented, most of our state were facing some challenges for unplanned development. Some of those were like traffic gridlock for sprawl type development. Also, our valuable natural resources were being lost. So our state legislatures and citizens were concerned about this. They were looking for a way to create a balance between man-made and natural environment. They realized that infrastructure cost is too high for unplanned development. If you look at that slide, if the same infrastructure that can serve 50 homes, but instead it serves 10 or 12 homes, then the cost for the infrastructure becomes unsustainable for cities. So with that realization, the state legislatures responded with RCW 3670A, the Growth Management Act. The requirement of Growth Management Act is to plan locally, and you need to set a framework for land use planning. Communities need to have their own goals and own vision, own set of evaluation or assessment of assets. So under the GMA framework, communities need to plan locally. So that's one of the requirements for Growth Management Act. So you see these are the growth management planning goals, and these are in random order. I used those all together, and I'll describe those in a little bit. GMA planning goals: urban growth and reduce sprawl. Urban growth encourages development where you have adequate public facilities, and reduce sprawl, that goal is interconnected with urban growth. So how you discourage the conversion of undeveloped land to a low density or unplanned development. So that's also another goal. And then we look at other goals, for example, transportation. Transportation encourages efficient and multimodal transportation, and that needs to address local and regional planning solution or planning system. Also, housing, how you provide housing for all income groups, affordable housing, and then how you provide different types of densities and different types of residential developments. Economic development, this is probably important more now than ever before, that how your planning process embraces the idea of creating jobs. and you probably have seen this in Marysville downtown development planning process, and also you will see a lot of jurisdictions are doing revitalization planning processes, and then you'll see business parks, you'll see a lot of other ways of addressing the job creation. So your planning process would have economic development being a key component in it. Property rights, your property should be protected from arbitrary and capricious decision. Grant had mentioned that already. Permits a timely and efficient processing in a timely manner to ensure predictability. Natural resource industries, if your jurisdiction has natural resources, for example, timbers, agricultural land, or fisheries, how do you address those or protect those and discourage incompatible land uses near them? Open space and recreation, if your jurisdiction has open space land, how do you protect those? And then GMA also encourages you to open up your open space for recreational opportunities. Environment, that's a goal that is overall, it ensures the environmental quality of the state, quality of water, quality of air in the state in general. And then citizen participation. Now, I have mentioned at the beginning that all of these goals are in random order. So although you see citizen participation now, but this is one of the components that begins or starts at the beginning of the planning process. So this is a key goal for the Growth Management Act, so that citizens could participate in the planning process. And also public facilities and services to ensure that you have adequate public facilities for developments to take place. Historic preservation, if your jurisdiction has landmark structure or site that needs to be protected. And shoreline management. So this is basically policy requirement in your comprehensive plan. I'll discuss that. But your planning process needs to address how you protect your shoreline. Although Shoreline Management Act actually guides the state's shoreline master program, but how Shoreline Management Act and GMA should coordinate with each other in your comprehensive plan. So that's the key here. So now we know what the GMA goals are. So we will. So what do we need with these goals? So we have these goals. How do we implement them? So under the GMA planning requirements, these are the documents that every jurisdiction needs to produce: critical area resource land ordinance, countywide planning policies, comprehensive plan, development regulations, and then how do you review and update them. So I will go over each of those. This is a very straightforward relationship. So you have your GMA, and then how it is implemented by your comprehensive plan, and then you have development regulations that follows your comprehensive plan policies, and then how you implement them through your project review process. So that's a basic relationship. So we were talking about development documents for under the GMA framework. So this is one of the components. If your community has critical areas and natural resource lands, your community needs to classify, designate, and protect those resource lands and critical areas. And this ordinance, community needs to produce an ordinance that addresses all of those. Countywide planning policies, that is a framework for local governments coordination between county and cities. So basically the understanding that county provides regional services and cities provide urban services. So that needs to be coordinated. So county and city, they designate urban growth areas, and then they cite the countywide facilities, regional facilities, and then also plan for regional issues and economic developments. And all of this need to be done for a 20-year population projection. So when we are talking about allocating urban growth areas between, it is a coordinated approach between county and cities, then it is a collaborative process, and it takes into account the 20-year population projection, and then also it looks at where the adequate public facilities are available. So when cities and county, they work together to allocate and designate these urban growth areas, you identify where your urban facilities are available now, and then the next step would be where you can actually efficiently provide urban facilities. So set up the priorities and where you can efficiently provide urban facilities. That's how cities and counties should allocate urban growth areas. So we discussed about Growth Management Act goals and then planning documents, and comprehensive plan is one of the planning documents, and this is a very important planning document. Why it is important to know about your comprehensive plan? So all of the items that we have discussed under GMA, those are being implemented in your comprehensive plan. That's why it's important, because your comprehensive plan sets your community's goal. So it is required under GMA that as a community you set up your own goal, your community's vision, and then you set up goals and policies for your community's future direction. So because of that, the comprehensive plan encompasses all of those elements, so it is a framework for your community's planning. And also for Planning Commission, any recommendation that you make to City Council should be based on the policies that you have in your comprehensive plan. So how do we produce a comprehensive plan? So when we prepare, or when we are ready to prepare a comprehensive plan document, then these are the elements that are components that we need to be aware of. First, we have the required elements by Growth Management Act. So I'll discuss that. So those need to be in your comprehensive plan. But at the same time, your comprehensive plan need to be consistent, compatible, coordinated, and concurrent. So let's discuss those. So these are the elements that you will see in any comprehensive plan. These are the required elements that under GMA framework you need to address. You need to have a land use element, you need to have housing, capital facilities, all of those. And if you look at that map, this is a portion of Marysville land use map, and yellow being the residential. You see that the land use map has low density, medium density, red being commercial, so all different types of land use being designated in the comprehensive plan. And these plans are designated with the 20-year future population projection. So when you have a land use designation or land use map that designates based on the population forecast, 20-year population projection, you have a map that is designating different types of land use categories. That brings us to the next slide of consistency. So you have land use element, which is based on population projection. Now, how do you make sure that those land use designation would have the adequate public facilities? So then you have to go back to the transportation and then infrastructure, other public facilities. So in a way, preparing a comprehensive plan, all of these elements need to be consistent with each other. So you're designating medium density land, you're designating commercial land, so then at the same time you're thinking of your road network, you're thinking of traffic capacity, you're thinking of your critical areas. So all of those elements need to be consistent with each other. And then at the same time, and the key of this is that based on your land use plan, all of this need to be consistent, but your land use plan also need to take into account the 20-year population projection. So those are all tied together. So you get this from the countywide planning policies, you get the population projection, and then you have the land use, and then you have all of these elements tied together, consistent with each other. And then we have compatibility. That's what I was talking about, that you work with the countywide planning policies, and then you address all of the issues that you share with your neighboring jurisdictions. For example, the road does not stop right at the city limits, so it goes to the next jurisdiction. So how you are coordinating with your neighboring jurisdiction in terms of traffic impact or stormwater or job housing opportunities. So all of that needs to be compatible. So your comprehensive plan needs to look at the compatibility with other jurisdictions and coordinate with them. So by saying coordination, what we are saying is that cities should consider and coordinate with other entities, and that's just not just your neighboring jurisdiction, but also state and other agencies. For example, if a state agency has a facility planned in your jurisdiction, local jurisdiction need to take that into account. So, for example, if your state has a plan to have a state route within your community, then your transportation plan or land use plan, when you're preparing those, you need to take into account that what would be the impact of that highways or the land use pattern, how would that be impacted? So all of those need to be coordinated. Also, when the construction takes place, how those two entities or two jurisdictions are working together, that's important as well. So concurrency, in a simple term, would be adequate public facilities concurrent with developments. Or let's put it this way, public facilities concurrent with developments, adequate public facilities are available or planned for a development to occur. So when you designate your land use, you just don't designate certain land use without looking at the infrastructure need and how do you serve them. So that's how you ensure that your adequate public facilities are available. And not only that, when you have adequate public facilities, that needs to maintain certain standards. And how do you maintain that standards? Your comprehensive plan, in your comprehensive plan, you identify certain levels of services for each types of components or elements. For example, transportation, if you have certain standards for waiting time at the traffic signal, your community can identify those standards for your own community's need. So that's how you identify your level of service, and then when you provide adequate public facilities, you need to make sure that those service standards are met. This is a very simple version of how you plan for capital facilities. So when we look at this planning process, our first step begins with our vision. So what is our vision for our community? So we look at that idea level, and then we go to the next step. We say, okay, what do we have at the inventory level? So once we know what we have, then we will try to find out what do we need. And what do we need is basically based on your forecast population. So if you have a 60,000 population now, and you have a 20-year projection that says you will have, let's say, 80,000. So you have that 20,000 population that has a demand, and you need to meet that demand in your capital facilities. So now we know the need for 20,000 more people. So then how we meet that need? So for example, if you are to provide traffic facilities or transportation facilities for 20,000 people, how do we provide that facilities? Do we only improve roads, or do we do a combination of multimodal transportation, transit, bicycle lane, and then pedestrian, and then we add roads? So it's a combination of all of that. So when we plan all of those facilities, when we propose all of those facilities, then we go to the next phase, and that's the most challenging phase. How do we pay for it? So once we figure out, then we have figured out everything. We have a financing plan in place. So if we have a financing plan, that's great, and it may not be in 2-year term. It could be 6-year, 20 years, so it could be folded with your capital improvement plan as well. So then once our projects are starting, our capital facilities projects or facilities are being provided, then we look at and assess our status. How are we doing? So monitoring the process. Is it doing well? Is it what the community wanted? So evaluating that is a constant process, and then you go back to the vision. If your community's vision changed, then you update that as well. So overall, this process, this is a cyclical process. It's like any planning process. You constantly change your community's demand based on your vision, but that's a basic way of doing it. I would like to spend a couple of minutes on citizen participation. I know that you have heard about citizen public meetings and all of the legal basis of meetings, but what I'm going to talk about citizen participation is that this is one of the first steps of a comprehensive planning process. So when jurisdictions start their planning process, they need to create a citizen participation plan at the very early on. So you have to have a citizen participation plan in place that would identify how you involved your community, how you have your vision developed, how you would have your components developed. So you will strategize your public participation plan, and then the process begins to work on your comprehensive plan. Now, there are multiple ways that you could have public participation, citizen participation. What GMA requires is that early and continuous meaningful dialogue or early participation process. You could do community visioning process, you could do workshops, you could do neighborhood meetings, and then you could have advisory committees, and then different types of public meetings. It all depends on your community's structure. But then when you come down to public hearing and notice requirements, it will be the legal requirements. So once you have your comprehensive plan almost complete and you are close to the adoption, that's when you need to have the public hearing and notice requirements. And those are required for any project applications as well, projects that qualify for public notification. So basically, public participation, it's multiple ways, but it's important to have a plan and strategize a plan that works for your community. One community's plan might be different from another community's public participation process. So those were the basics of Comprehensive Plan and Growth Management Act, but on top of that, I mean, what is required and what communities are adding onto their comprehensive plan to be more competitive, these are the emerging issues. All of you probably have heard sustainable development, climate change, green infrastructure, smart growth principles, all of that, and active and healthy communities. So you could, if those are your community's priorities, or if your community feels that those are important, you can fold in your comprehensive plan policies how you address those. Once you have the policies to address this, then you can have the next step of development regulations or next step of planning to address those. So this is a map that indicates the deadline, countywide deadline to meet the GMA requirements and prepare a comprehensive plan. So communities already have met one set of deadlines that were required a few years back, but now is the time for the next step of the comprehensive plan, and these are the deadlines that communities need to meet. So if you have any questions regarding comprehensive plan, I know it's a very exciting topic, and then you will definitely want to find out more and more about comprehensive plan. You can go and find good resources in any of the sites. Those are really good. You can also ask your staff. Your staff is always a good resource for comprehensive planning. You can ask State Department of Commerce. They're always very good resource for information, and any of the sites will give you really good information as well. The question was, when we implement a comprehensive plan, then how do we address zoning code to implement the comprehensive plan. Is that right? Yeah, when I was showing that slide of the basic relationships from GMA to comprehensive plan and development regulations, that's how zoning code is how you implement your comprehensive plan. However, in this scope of presentation, we didn't go into the detail of the zoning code because we discussed only the comprehensive plan basics. But you are absolutely right. When zoning code is the development regulations, the next step from the comprehensive plan, it should be consistent with your comprehensive plan document to implement all of the goals and policies that you have in your comprehensive plan. So yes, that actually implements your goals. Thanks. With that, I really like to thank you for letting me be here, and thank you very much.